The most disturbing aspect of this case isn't that a house was haunted. It's that Borley Rectory was so violently supernatural that it terrorized 3 different families over 8 decades, with paranormal investigators documenting over 2,000 unexplained incidents, including phantom nuns, mysterious fires, and messages from the dead scrawled across walls by invisible hands. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're fascinated by paranormal mysteries and documented hauntings, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on for more incredible stories like this one. In the quiet village of Borley, Essex, England, there once stood a Victorian Gothic rectory that would become known as the most haunted house in England. Built in 1862 on the site of a medieval monastery, Borley Rectory was destined to become the center of one of the most extensively documented paranormal investigations in history. For over 80 years, this imposing brick structure would be home to phenomena so disturbing and persistent that it would drive away 3 separate families and attract the attention of the world's most renowned ghost hunters. The story of Borley Rectory begins with its very foundation. The house was constructed by Reverend Henry Bull, a man who seemed almost to invite the supernatural into his home. Bull built the rectory on the ruins of a 13th century Benedictine monastery, and local legend spoke of a tragic love story that had played out on these very grounds centuries earlier. According to village folklore, a monk from the monastery had fallen in love with a nun from the nearby Bures convent. Their forbidden romance led to a desperate escape attempt that ended in tragedy when they were caught and executed. The monk hanged, and the nun bricked up alive in the convent walls. Reverend Bull, far from being deterred by these dark legends, seemed fascinated by them. He was a man of unusual interests for a Victorian clergyman, reportedly dabbling in spiritualism and the occult. Bull had 14 children and filled his new rectory with an atmosphere that seemed to welcome otherworldly visitors. Almost immediately after moving in, the Bull family began experiencing phenomena that would set the pattern for decades of supernatural activity to come. The first recorded incident occurred in 1863, just 1 year after the family moved in. Reverend Bull himself reported seeing the ghostly figure of a nun walking through the rectory gardens at dusk. This apparition, dressed in the gray habit of a medieval religious order, would become the most famous and frequently cited ghost of Borley Rectory. Bull was so intrigued by these sightings that he actually had a summer house built in the garden, specifically to provide a better vantage point for observing the phantom nun. The supernatural activity escalated throughout the Bull family's residence. Footsteps echoed through empty corridors at all hours of the night. Doors opened and closed on their own, often with such violence that the sound could be heard throughout the house. Strange lights appeared in windows of unoccupied rooms, and the family's servants reported being touched by invisible hands while going about their duties. Most disturbing of all were the sounds. Unexplained rappings on walls, the jingling of keys when no keys were present, and what sounded like whispered conversations in empty rooms. On July 28, 1900, 4 of Reverend Bull's daughters experienced what would become one of the most famous ghost sightings in British history. While walking in the garden during the twilight hours, all 4 young women simultaneously witnessed the phantom nun walking along what they described as an ancient pathway. The apparition was so clear and detailed that they could make out the texture of her habit and the expression of profound sadness on her face. This sighting was particularly significant because it involved multiple witnesses who all corroborated the same details. Reverend Henry Bull died in the rectory's Blue Room in 1892, but his death did nothing to quiet the supernatural activity. If anything, it seemed to intensify. His son, Henry Bull Jr., took over as rector and continued to document the strange occurrences. The younger Bull reported that his father's ghost now joined the phantom nun in haunting the rectory, often appearing in the same blue room where he had died. The family began to accept these supernatural visitors as simply part of life at Borley Rectory. The Bull family's tenure at the rectory lasted until 1927, when Henry Bull Jr. died and the living became too much for the remaining family members. The rectory stood empty for a year, but even without human occupants, local villagers reported seeing lights in the windows and hearing the sounds of footsteps and voices coming from the supposedly vacant building. It was as if the ghosts had claimed the rectory as their own domain. In 1928, the Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into Borley Rectory, hoping to make a fresh start in their new parish. What they found instead was a supernatural nightmare that would drive them away within a year. The Smiths immediately began experiencing phenomena that surpassed even what the Bull family had reported. Objects moved on their own with increasing frequency and violence. Mrs. Smith's personal belongings would disappear from locked rooms, only to reappear days later in impossible locations. The most terrifying incidents involved direct physical contact with the unseen entities. Mrs. Smith reported being slapped by invisible hands while alone in the rectory. Stones were thrown at the couple from inside the house, even when they were certain they were alone. The phantom nun appeared more frequently than ever, sometimes multiple times in a single day, and her appearances were accompanied by an overwhelming sense of sadness and desperation that left witnesses emotionally drained. Unable to cope with the constant supernatural assault, the Smiths contacted the Daily Mirror newspaper, hoping that publicity might somehow help them understand or resolve their situation. This decision would prove to be pivotal in the history of Borley Rectory, as it brought the case to the attention of Harry Price, Britain's most famous paranormal investigator. Price was a controversial figure, part scientist, part showman, but he was also the most methodical and well-equipped ghost hunter of his era. Price's first visit to Borley Rectory in June 1929 convinced him that he was dealing with something extraordinary. During his initial investigation, he witnessed phenomena that defied rational explanation. Stones materialized out of thin air and struck him and his companions. A vase flew across a room with no apparent cause. Most remarkably, Price observed what he described as spirit writing, messages that appeared on walls and pieces of paper, apparently written by invisible hands. The Smiths fled Borley Rectory in 1929, unable to endure the supernatural persecution any longer. The house was then rented to Reverend Lionel Foister and his much younger wife Mary Ann, along with their adopted daughter Adelaide. The Foister family's 5-year residence would prove to be the most active and violent period in the rectory's haunted history. Mary Ann Foister, in particular, seemed to be a focus for the supernatural activity, experiencing phenomena that were both more frequent and more personal than anything previously recorded. The spirits appeared to communicate directly with Mary Ann through the mysterious wall writings that had begun during the Smith family's residence. Messages appeared overnight, scrawled in childish handwriting across the walls of various rooms. These messages were often personal and disturbing, with phrases like, "Mary Ann, please help get," and "Mary Ann, light mass prayers" appearing regularly. The entities seemed desperate to communicate with her, and their attempts grew increasingly frantic and violent. Physical attacks on Mary Ann became commonplace. She was thrown from her bed by invisible forces, slapped and pinched by unseen hands, and on one terrifying occasion, nearly strangled by what she described as ghostly fingers around her throat. Objects flew through the air with deadly accuracy, often aimed directly at her. The family's belongings were constantly rearranged or destroyed, and the sounds of phantom footsteps, voices, and music filled the rectory day and night. Harry Price continued his investigations throughout the Foister family's residence, documenting over 2,000 separate paranormal incidents. He installed temperature monitoring equipment, cameras, and other scientific instruments, but the phenomena seemed to mock his attempts at measurement. Cameras malfunctioned at crucial moments. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly without explanation, and his carefully placed objects were moved or destroyed by the unseen entities. The Foister family finally abandoned Borley Rectory in 1935, driven away by the relentless supernatural persecution. Harry Price then took the unprecedented step of renting the rectory himself, turning it into what he called the most haunted house in England and the world's first scientific ghost laboratory. He recruited a team of 48 volunteer investigators and established a systematic, round-the-clock observation of the building. During his tenancy from 1937 to 1938, Price documented phenomena that seemed to respond to the investigators' presence. The spirits appeared to enjoy an audience, with activity increasing whenever multiple observers were present. The mysterious wall writings continued, often appearing in rooms that were under constant surveillance. Most remarkably, the entities seemed to predict their own future, with messages appearing that warned of the rectory's destruction by fire. On February 27, 1939, 11 months after Price's lease expired, Borley Rectory was indeed destroyed by fire. The new owner, Captain W.H. Gregson, was sorting through books in the hallway when a lamp mysteriously fell and ignited the building. The fire spread with supernatural speed, consuming the entire structure within hours. Even as the rectory burned, witnesses reported seeing the phantom nun walking through the flames, apparently unharmed by the inferno that was destroying her earthly haunt. The destruction of Borley Rectory did not end its haunted legacy. The ruins continued to be the site of paranormal activity for years afterward. In 1943, Harry Price conducted a seance in the burned-out shell of the building, during which the spirit claiming to be the medieval nun allegedly revealed that her bones were buried in the rectory's cellar. Excavations in the ruins did indeed uncover human remains, including a female skull and jawbone, lending credence to the centuries-old legend. Today, more than 80 years after its destruction, Borley Rectory remains one of the most famous haunted locations in the world. While skeptics have questioned some of Harry Price's methods and conclusions, the sheer volume of documented phenomena and the consistency of reports from multiple unconnected witnesses make it impossible to dismiss entirely. Whether the result of genuine supernatural activity, psychological suggestion, or elaborate fraud, Borley Rectory stands as a testament to humanity's enduring fascination with the unknown and our desperate need to believe that death is not the end of consciousness. If you found this paranormal investigation as compelling and disturbing as we did, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on. We explore the most intriguing ghost stories and supernatural mysteries from around the world, bringing you cases that challenge our understanding of reality itself. Your support helps us continue investigating these incredible phenomena. Until next time, remember that some houses hold secrets so dark that they transcend death itself, and the most haunted places on Earth may be windows into realms we're not meant to understand.